everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of King Me REV'S Hype Podcast, where today, and if you were watching last week, you will know that this man came highly regarded and highly sought after, and here we are. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, humans of all genders, I introduce to you to the one and only Ref Nick Mitchell. Nick, thanks for being here today, man.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm surprised I came highly recommended.
Yeah, so as of recording, it would have been yesterday, but as of when this drops, it'll be a week ago from that last episode, of course. So I had Corey Von Quest on the podcast, and he sang your praises to the highest of heavens on several parts of that particular podcast, saying, "Hey, man, if you watch me, you better make sure to watch the Ref next week because he's the man you want to see." So,
thank you, Corey.
He very much had a lot of love and praise for you and said some wonderful things. And, honestly, that's something that's, I always tell people that my podcast is a no smoke zone. We're not here to start trouble. It's a no shade zone. We're not here to talk trash, right? It's hype. We are here to hype up the guests. We are here to hype up the crowd. We are here to get people entertained and send them all home. And a big thing that me and my daughter do especially is make sure that if we know that someone in the wrestling community is loved, we make sure that they know they're loved, right? So I just wanted to start out today, and I normally have a curveball question that most people would know that I ask it, from time to time. I have a little curveball, kind of, changes the perspective of people. But my curveball today is just to make sure that you're loved, sir, because I have not just Corey, but many other people in the industry have said wonderful, amazing things about you. And, it's great. It's just wonderful to feel the love of the wrestling community. So all praises be to you, sir.
Thank you, man. That's awesome. The wrestling world can sometimes be like a cesspool of negativity, so it's definitely refreshing and good to hear some positivity going on.
Absolutely. And if you want to hear some more, my daughter, she's 13 years old. She, after a great session, you could say, with Aaron Rourke, the wonderful WWE Evolve champion, the super talented man that he is, she decided to become a professional wrestling photographer, and she's been doing. Some people are waiting for pictures. She probably has over 13,000 photographs. I still got to edit. All right, guys. So they'll come when I come. I promise. It's a work in progress, but that's not on her. It's on me. I take all the blame. But the wonderful thing about especially the New England wrestling community is they have been so warming and welcoming and so gracious with their time and their genuine love for my daughter and myself, to the point where my daughter has wrestling parents and wrestling aunts and wrestling uncles and wrestling cousins and brothers and sisters and stuff, and we go and we see these people at all kinds of different, as you would know, anybody can pretty much be on any show in this area at any time, and we go to these shows, and whether they're fans like Hot Pocket Master, John, JJ over the other JJ, I love that kid. Or the wonderful and amazingly talented Shannon Levangie, or the Godfather, the personal GOAT, Rich Palladino.
Shout out Rich.
Shout out Rich Palladino. We love you, sexy Rich. Every single time we see any one of these number of people, and I could literally be here for the next hour telling you all the stories, they are not only gracious with their time, but they are more than happy to welcome my daughter into their space. And as I've said before, to my daughter especially, that once Rich Palladino says you're in the crowd, you don't have to worry about it anymore. All right, so there we go, guys. Starting today out with a love fest. There we go.
Hey.
Love Doug would be proud.
Yes, he would.
Awesome. So once again, thank you so much for being here today. You seem to be a jack of all trades yourself. I guess my first question, but normally it's a curveball, but let's go with the softball today. When did you go from fan to wrestling professional? I'm curious.
Yeah. I little over a year now. Fall winter of 2014, or sorry, 2024. I decided to make the jump over. So Pure Vanguard Wrestling out of Bristol, Connecticut, the father-son combo that owned that company. I went to high school with the son, Warren, and after seeing one of their shows that they had done, seeing the talk about it on Facebook, I decided to reach out to him because I hadn't talked to him since high school, probably. And it was really just like, hey, this is really awesome that you're actually doing this, like, actually owning a company. Like, that's really cool. I hope it's doing well. I'd love to come to a show sometime, like maybe help out, whatever. Um, and that turned into, maybe I'll be a referee for you guys. And that turned into just jumping full on into, okay, I need to get trained. Uh, Started going to Paradise Alley Pro Wrestling in November of 2024. Started refereeing shows right after that, and just kind of increased my role different places since then.
Right? And yeah, no, shout out Pure Vanguard. I want to say the next show is June 13th,
It is.
Saturday, June 13th. I'm
Yes.
very excited for two of my favorite people in the world to collide when we have Corey Von Quest, who is going to be working alongside the
Yep.
Zach. I love you,
Yes.
Zach. He is
Yes. Love that.
he's a great guy. He's part of the wrestling family. My daughter just had him adopted in as a wrestling brother this past weekend. We gave him the award certificate and everything, and he graciously accepted it with loving open arms. So the idea of the two of them, Zach and Corey getting together, I think they're going to do some magic on the behind the booth in the booth.
Yeah, and talk about like two of the nicest people that you could come across in this industry.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Zach, he actually came to a show one time with my daughter and I. We were just, he was just there as a civilian. He wasn't working. But it was hilarious because he brought a giant bag of candy, and he made sure my daughter was well fed with candy, so she loved him very much for that. And then he basically just gave us our own color commentary all night. So we had our own private Zach
Yeah.
commentary. He does a
Mhm.
really great impression of Johnny Pierce and some other folks. I won't name, just I don't want to get him
Mm.
any heat or anything, but he
Yeah.
does he does some really
I've
great
been
impersonations.
I've been a ringside witness to his commentary just as a fan. He was just ringside at one of the shows I was reffing, and he was close enough for me to hear his full commentary. And yeah, it was just him practicing, and that's how he sounds so polished once he's actually out there. Because even when he's not doing it, he's doing it.
Yeah, exactly. So it was nice to get our own private
Mm.
commentary booth. To be honest with you, I was like, I feel kind of special right now. This is cool. We got this guy brought all the snacks we'll ever need, and he's
Yeah,
bringing the fun. Like,
that's why he's the Zote.
where can you go wrong with the Zote, man? I love this guy. Welcome to the family, Zach. We're so happy you joined. Um, so and PAPW, unfortunately have yet to go down there and see any of their stuff, but they have been following me for a little while, and they love my stuff, especially on TikTok for whatever reason. I'm
Okay.
not sure why, but thank you so much for the support. So once again, the Love Fest continues. Thank you, PAPW, for the support, and I make sure to support them back as much as I can. Hopefully and this is going to be on the bingo card. It happens almost every episode, so let's just pull the band-aid. We in New England are spoiled. Let's be honest. There are, in any given night, 4, 5, 6 different shows, right? And there's a lot of the shows that are like maybe Connecticut, Rhode Island, Vermont that JJ and I haven't been to because either it's the weather is not good for 4 hours of driving, or B, it's a Sunday show and my ex-wife doesn't like Sunday shows. So we have, yeah, which is a valid because the kid has school the next day. I get it. So what I'm hoping to do is to go to more shows like that this coming summer, as many as possible, to make up for the fact that we've missed so many, especially over the winter time. So shout out to those places. Thanks for the support and the mutual love, right?
Yeah,
Um,
I believe New England has like 60 companies. Like
yes.
Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you'd be hard pressed to not find something within a half-hour drive.
Yeah, exactly. And if anything, it's more of and I've heard from so many fans, especially they we all have our own pecking order. Like we all have like maybe a specific company that we pick first, or a specific wrestler that we follow around. In our household, Shannon Levangie is number one, right? So if doesn't matter what the company is or where Shannon Levangie is, we're going to that number one no matter what we're missing, right? We just then there's kind of a muck in the middle, but Shannon Lavangie's number one. If Shannon's there, we're there. So that's JJ's personal goat. JJ loves her to no end, and I support it as much as I can because I think Shannon is an amazing talent and a wonderful human being, to be quite frank. So
Yeah, and I'm glad to see that she was able to return to the ring so quickly. I was the referee for the match where she got her teeth knocked back with Becca, and she she wanted to finish the match, like have like a full on, whatever they had planned. But I made the decision, rightly so, to all right, let's bring this home and end the match so that you can go to the hospital because your teeth were knocked back into your face.
yes,
Um,
that
yeah,
is a
so I'm
great
glad to see
plan.
she's doing well.
AJ will love you for that. All right. Love Fest continues.
Yes.
That's actually one of the shows that JJ and I were really trying to bargain with my ex-wife so she can go to
Mm,
it. And in hindsight, being as 2020 as it is, very happy we didn't go because JJ would have been a wreck
yep.
when she saw Shannon got hurt. There's no way she would have been a
Hmm.
wreck. Kudos to you to being and I attend wrestling school at this time, and one of the biggest conversations one of my coaches had was the idea of the sometimes people who get hurt are going to try to push themselves through it, and it's really up to us to say no, no, no. You can have a pure respect for someone who wants to keep going and keep fighting, but there's a time and a place where you have to cut them off because you have to put um the personal safety over the show
Yeah,
sometimes. So
absolutely. And I was lucky that it was for a company in Blood, Sweat, and Tears that fully backed me immediately afterwards, saying like you did the right thing. I'm really happy you did that. Not saying any particular companies would have been upset at that, but you just never know sometimes with creative plans or you know you just never know. So I was very happy that Harry, one of the owners at Blood, Sweat, and Tears, immediately afterwards was like, "Thank you for doing that. Thank you for getting Shannon out there as quickly as possible."
and kudos to everyone involved, and I can tell you from the King household, thank you very much for doing that because Shannon Levangie is the superstar gem in this household for sure. So um
And shout
yeah,
out to Becca too for accompanying her to the hospital. Um,
yes. And the pictures, man. Woof.
mhm,
She
yeah,
put those pictures out on Saturday, and
hmm
JJ and I were just like, I don't know if I can look at this
yeah,
anymore. Ooh,
hmm
that was rough. That was rough. So I mean, and you've been a referee at many places, whether it's the Open, like you kept talking about the Vanguard, and you must have what. maybe I should ask this question. What was it like, you go to training and you come out. This is one thing that I feel like even like wrestling fans don't really understand until you don't get it, because whether you're a wrestler, whether you're in the ring as a wrestler or in the ring as a referee, there is a sense of your job is not just to wrestle or to ref, but to make sure that we do this in a safe manner and that we take care of each other. What is it like knowing that that is, I wouldn't say primarily on your shoulders, but like professionally one of your major roles as a referee?
Yeah. You know, obviously breaking kayfabe a little bit. The wrestler's job when they're receiving these moves is to sell to the audience that they're really hurt. And part of my job is to make sure that they're not really hurt. Um, Whether it's a quick, little finger grab just to make sure they're good, or verbally just asking like, "Hey, you all right?" Um, yeah, just without making it super obvious to the audience,
Of
just
course.
to not break that, break the illusion. Um, yeah, I mean, at least I view it as my top priority, just because if you're not concerned about the well-being of the people that are, performing for the audience, then it's not it's not wrestling. It's just I don't know, like a pit fight or something. I don't know what you want to
Right?
call it.
Blood sport.
Um, yeah,
So, and that was actually one of the things that I feel like psychologically hit me when I started wrestling, that it wasn't just about the idea of I'm getting in there and I need to worry about how I'm going to execute XYZ move. It's the idea of when I'm doing this, I have to make sure I'm doing these specific things. Obviously, I'm not going to peel back the curtain too much here, but psychologically, you have to perform things in a certain manner so you're doing it safely, not really for yourself, more so for your opponent, to take care of them first and foremost. Because there are some times where, I learned some things and they're like, yeah, you could do that, but you're probably going to kick someone and you're probably going to injure your opponent horribly if you don't do it this way for this reason. So
absolutely.
there's a lot more responsibility that goes into being a professional wrestler than I would think the average fan even wouldn't comprehend.
Absolutely.
Right. I mean, and it's such a different thing. So, I was in the army, and I was like to say, the army didn't teach me to hold hands and sing kumbaya, right? And then I did MMA training for 2 or 3 years. And once again, like CQC or like, let's say, jujitsu is literally you trying to hurt your opponent as fast or as swift as possible and as effective as possible. And it's almost been this reverse where I'm like, I'm trying to do it, but not actually kill them. So,
Yeah, and that's often a thing that people who come from actual combat sports, or they grew up like just knowing how to fight, you know they they sometimes assume that it's a good transition into wrestling. But there's a lot of stuff that you have to unlearn,
yeah,
that to just looking at a simple punch, to throw a jab in boxing versus to throwing a punch in professional wrestling is so different, that you have to unlearn how to throw your boxing punch, otherwise you'll break your opponent's nose you know
100%. 100%. I mean, for me, like something like wrist locks and like headlocks,
hmm
I'm so used to genuinely trying to crank your brain out that there are times where I've had a coach go like, hey, stop, stop, stop. What are you doing? What are you doing? You trying to kill this guy? Are you trying to kill this
yeah.
guy? We're working together here, man. Stop that. And I'm like, I apologize. Like I
hmm
genuinely just went into like a wrist lock. I went into the mode of, I'm like, the first couple of times, especially, when they're just like, all right, you learned it, now go. And I'm like, they're like, oh, no, you got to break his arm. I'm like, oh, sorry. That was the last job. The last job. I apologize. We're not doing that anymore. Not doing it anymore. But yeah, no, it's, I try to point that out just because there are so many things that even especially wrestling fans, they pretend like they know what's happening. And like once you hit those ropes once, you realize how little you really know about what it's like to really be in that ring. All right.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
not
the bruises you get on your side just from running the ropes, it is crazy until your body gets used to it.
great. And for anybody that's a fan of the channel, I'm sure you've seen me post those pictures. So you know they're there. It's all black and dark black and purple and stuff. So
Yes.
so you've been officiating for about a year now then?
Yeah, at this point, I would say like a year and a half.
So, this is a question I like to ask. And once again, I'm not someone who's like a gotcha journalist. I'm trying to get a certain thought process here. That's something that I asked Donovan Jack, and I think I can ask you because you've been to so many places at this point. When you go to, let's say, because I know you ref at the Open, we've talked about a couple of spots. When you ref at these different spots, do you have a certain measurement, maybe not just for success while you're there, but exceeding that particular promotion's expectations while you're there as well?
For sure. Yeah, for me at least, outside of, obviously refereeing to the best of my ability, really making yourself as invaluable as possible behind the scenes. Using this past weekend as an example, I made I guess you can call it my debut for Rebel Spirit Pro Wrestling, but it wasn't as a referee. I was handling like the backstage production aspects, giving referees time cues, making sure the wrestlers were where they needed to be before their match, so they weren't, missing. Um, you know, being like seated right next to the owner who was, handling all of the sound and camera production back and forth. Um, it was something that owner needed more so than having a third referee on his show. And because I've been getting experience doing that as well, that's where my value was most needed at that point. So yeah, I mean, overwhelming majority of the shows I'm going to be at will be as a referee. I, Especially when I work shows with the great Kurt Adonis. He that's the big value that he brings to a lot of companies, a lot of like large companies, and learning under him. Uh, he's preached harped into me, make yourself invaluable in other ways outside of just being a referee, because whether you're a good referee or not, if all you do when you get to a show is sit around and talk to the boys in the back and then do your matches and that's it, um, you're maybe not providing as much value as you could. Which is why
Of
somebody
course.
like Zach the Zote is so useful, because he can referee, but he can also be your color. He can do interviews. He can, he just does everything.
Right. And it's funny because obviously Zach and I are buddies, but him and I have talked about, and Corey, we had the conversation yesterday. Me coming into the business like that, I made a laundry list of things that I would do, and I'm calling it the menu. I'm like, look, here's the Rev Dude menu. you guys want to pick me to do this, or whatever, I'll do whatever you need to do. But I love the fact that there's a person like Zach out there, the Zote, and I'll put him over all day because he has no problem being, especially like, let's say I just saw him this past weekend at Northeast Championship Wrestling. That's why it's freshest in my mind, I would say, though I see him all the time at Focus Pro, of course. But, when we were at NCW, he was refereeing, but he was at the same time making sure, because there was one too many kids running around. So when he wasn't refereeing, he was trying to corral the children, right? There was a giant street fight at the end, and he was just trying to make sure the crowd wasn't getting too involved like they shouldn't be. And in between different things, he was making sure to talk up to the crowd and get them going and get them engaged and make sure they're paying attention before the match started, which I think is wonderful because children don't have the best attention spans. And when you have when you're at a school and most of your audience members are children, you might want to get their attention, right? So I can certainly concur with the idea that, someone especially like Zach is great for the promotion because he's not just worried about doing his thing and leaving. He's making sure that things are working smoothly across the board. I was actually going to ask you about, because JJ and I went to the second half of we went to New Order Wrestling, and then we jumped in the car. We drove an hour and a half so we can see what ended up being the second half of Rebel Spirit. And I was going to ask you what you had been doing because I did see that you were supposed to be debuting, etc. But I just saw Tanaka and Brendan Paul, so I was like, he didn't. I don't remember seeing him referee at all. I remember seeing
Yes.
Tanaka and Brendan, so I was curious. That was actually going to be a question, so I'm happy you brought it up. Great segue for me.
Yeah, I think I ended up appearing in one photo after the Dustin Waller TKO Ryan street fight, where there
Right.
was a couple of broken doors. I went out there and just helped sweep up the little wood bits and stuff. But yeah, the rest of the show I was right in what they call gorilla position, right near the monitors, and helping out the two referees with their time cues. If a match needed to go home early, if it was running over time, stuff like that. Just kind of helping the owner like do the things that he just didn't have the time to do.
Of course. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. You cannot cover left field from first base. I don't care how great of a player you are. There are positions that you have to learn, whether it's in wrestling or the rest of the world. There are positions, there are jobs that you have to learn to delegate off to other people so you can focus on what you think is your strongest suit and what you genuinely feel is the most important tasks or whatever it is need to be done. So it sounds like a smart move on this gentleman's behalf to get a man like you in the room to make sure that those other bases are covered so he can handle the stuff, because that show was great, man. Shout out to we had I know they were in separate matches, but Godric, of course. We had Patrick Wheatman. We had Cash Money McGinnis. Those guys were in the house. We missed their matches, so I want to make sure to shout them out there. They were in the first half, unfortunately. Shout out to the wonderful and welcome to the family, Aunt Julie Cutler. Thank you so much for being the wrestling auntie to my beautiful beloved JJ, and the JJ's stepmom, as she would say, Danielle. Thank you so much for being part of the family now. We appreciate and love you guys so much. But, we showed up at the time to see, let's say, like Sean Knight and Jay Onyx put on a great match, and then the Dustin Waller TKO straight fight. Like, that was incredible. There was all kinds of carnage and mayhem going on. And of course, a person who I literally talked to that night, and we're gonna bring him back on for a second go around. The superstar rookie of the year he was for 2025, I Black Jack. He's gonna be back on the podcast pretty soon, and he had some wonderful, amazing stuff to do. So, it was a great show.
Yeah, yeah. I'm looking forward to going back to them for some future shows. Whether it's refereeing or just being behind the scenes. They're one of those companies where like you want to be involved in whatever way possible, and that I mean, honestly, that's how I've gotten work with some of the larger companies that I've worked for, like uh, GCW, which is one of the few, you know, globally touring companies. I was like, hey, I will come and help out and do whatever you want. And it was enough to help out the guy who handles all the backstage stuff and is the head of referees. Um, and so that got me uh, a match on one show, and then a couple like security spots that turned into like a couple crazy bumps for me last show, and then I'll be at the next time they're in Hartford as well. So it's just being available and offering to do whatever's needed, really.
See, and I love the fact that you're giving me these beautiful segues because those were questions I was going to ask. Going to ask you about GCW and Fourth Rope.
Hmm.
Uh, so it's wonderful to hear because I feel like so often in life you always hear that hard work pays off. And let's be honest, in a lot of cases outside of the wrestling world, it's not always true. It's not always true. But the thing I do love about professional wrestling is it's true here, right? If you work hard and you network, you make sure people understand how hard you're willing to work for them, opportunities open doors and you are able to walk into those. So it's great to hear how you got the GCW. I was thinking about bringing JJ down to the Hartford show, and it's still a debate just because there's something else going on, I think, at the same time. So, which is always the case here in New England, as we already stated. But GCW, how did you get into Fourth Rope? Now that you answered the GCW
Yeah.
question.
The great Kurt Adonis, who I guess I would consider my wrestling dad, my wrestling mentor, whatever you want to call it. He uh, would handle their Fourth Ropes pre-show meet and greets, as well as a lot of like the behind the scenes stuff, like the referees time cues and like when to hit entrance music, stuff like that. And it just turned into like a, hey, are you available to come on this day, like kind of last minute. Luckily I was able to make it work with my wife. Huge props to her because we have a 8-month-old at home, and so kind of juggling all of that has been you know big thing on her end, and while still allowing me to do what I love doing as much as we can kind of make it work. uh, so yeah, sort of last minute, I was able to go down to Fourth Rope's show in New Jersey, which had gotten like rain delayed like 2 days, so there was a lot of like roster changes and a lot of like stuff up in the air. Uh, it was myself, Kurt, and a few others down there, just making sure the pre-show meet and greet ran as smoothly as possible, and then I refed however many matches on that card, and it talk about an insane wrestling environment, not full of the normal wrestling fans. A lot of them are, through like West Side Guns, like music stuff. So it
Right,
was like
right,
it
right.
wasn't the typical wrestling crowd, and they were all in on it. It was amazing.
That's a beautiful story, man. Congratulations to you and your wife for the birth of your wonderful child, and the you know I have to say props to your wonderful wife for supporting your dreams. As my oldest son is 24, right? So I like to tell people how I have been a father on this earth longer than I was not. I was
Mm,
16 years old when my son was born.
wow.
Something I do not recommend whatsoever.
Yeah.
Um, Not a smart plan, but it is the reason why at 17 I joined the United States Army, because I knew it was a way I could pay the rent. And it's not easy finding a partner in the world that will do what they can to make sure that your dreams are taken care of. So it's always a beautiful and wonderful thing to see when that happens, because it's the support is always given. And once again, anytime there's any love in this world, I like sure to make sure to point it out, just so that people, we have too much negativity, guys. There's too much negativity, and we see so much of it all over the internet all the time, that even if you call me cringy, I gotta say, you know what? We gotta point out the positivity we can, because I'm a positive Pete. Let's do it. Want to make Simon Miller proud, guys. But fourth rope, that's wonderful. If anybody remembers from the channel, I got to spend those 3 wonderful days with Zilla Fatu, and I got to spend some wonderful time with his family and his mother, especially wonderful people. They welcomed me into the family. I am Zilla's honorary Oos. He is officially my tribal chief. All right. And if you don't believe me, guys, go back to the YouTube channel. There's a video. There's like literally a 6-minute video proving this. Like, it was on his live. So my face was on his live for 3
Wow.
days. You know
Let,
this, guys. Come on.
let me tell you too. The first time a Samoan wrestler calls you Oos is really cool.
It is. It really is.
And for me, it was Zilla.
Zilla, there you go. Zilla's my guy. Zilla is my guy. The funny thing is, I saw him in September of last year at a HOG show. And at the time, I had put out the idea that I was going to start a podcast, because I've had podcasts in the past, but I wanted to start this new podcast. And I started having all kinds of crazy doubts in my mind. And if anybody knows Zilla's story, he's seen a lot worse than a couple of doubts about a podcast, guys. All right. So when got to watch him squash Bully Ray for the HOG Crown Jewel title in like 60 seconds, right? And after that, he did a meet and greet. And I asked him, like, what is it that got you from here to here? And he gave me some wonderful advice. I took it much to heart. And when I got to see him next time in Las Vegas at WrestleCon, I made sure to show my gratitude and appreciation for that, advice, and let him know that it had been applied. And here we are. So because of that love that I gave back to him, he reciprocated it, and we spent like 3 days together, and it was insane. So never thought in a million.
Yeah.
So my tribal chief, whatever about the rest of them, I don't care. Zilla's my tribal chief. I am his one and only honorary Oos, and that's a scientific fact. And if you don't believe me, watch the video, guys. Let's get it together. But yeah, fourth rope is great. I did get to talk a little bit to Enzo, right? He was standing next to Zilla 4 days in a row, so it was kind of hard not to talk to him about stuff. Who is also a super cool guy. The fourth rope crowd and community does seem like a much different breed of wrestling fan, because it is coming from that music world as well, right? So it kind of seems like it's bringing it in, but that's not too much of a far-fetched concept for us anyways, because we've had like Juggalo Championship Wrestling, and the ICP guys have been wrestling for 30 plus years. So it's not too shocking to be like, hey, I'm a wrestler or a promoter in the wrestling world, but I'm also this kind of music person, and I'm bringing my fans into it. If anything, it just creates one strong niche market, is what I should say.
And the hard part with a lot of wrestling shows, especially in an area like New England where there are 60 whatever companies, is trying to find those first time wrestling show people. Like I'm not say somebody who's not a wrestling fan per se, especially someone who doesn't go to indie wrestling shows, getting those people like in the door for the first time and potentially creating a new fan, that's where these like kind of like crossover sort of companies like Fourth Row and I also want to give a big shout out to Cava Wrestle, which is a unique mixture of drag, burlesque, wrestling, and punk rock. That crowd is almost exclusively non-wrestling fans, but they were into it. It was one of the loudest crowds I've ever been a part of each of the two times I've worked with them so far, because they just bought in right away. And, if you're into drag and burlesque, you're into the showmanship aspect of theater and performing, and wrestling fits right in there. And so the crowd immediately bought in and they were hyped, but they also weren't jaded wrestling fans. So they didn't care if a match wasn't like a 5-star Meltzer, indie banger. They thought a vertical suplex was really cool, and it is. But like if you've seen them, you know, 300 times at indie shows, then they lose their luster, I guess. But for those fans, it didn't.
Yes. No, it's a beautiful thing, and that's another reason why I love companies like Rad Pro where wrestling with
Mhm.
character, right? Because
Yes.
they're bringing, or we were talking with Corey about the cosplay. I know
Hmm.
uh there's the cosplay, there's the kaiju, there's these wrestling companies that it's not only just great for, let's say, bringing in new fans or bringing kids in for various reasons, and it's also great because it's exposing the wrestlers themselves to maybe different characters that they never would have been comfortable trying on their own or doing on their own, right? You normally wouldn't walk up to a person in wrestling school and say, "Hey, do you want to dress up as an elf?" Right? That wouldn't be a sell. But someone like Lauren's like, "Okay, that sounds like a fun." You know what I mean? You want me to be a penguin next week? Let's go. So, and it's almost freeing in a way because you don't have to worry about the confines of your original character. You could become something else. I mean, um and this is technically not a spoiler because this podcast won't drop to the end of the month, I want to say, and JJ's not going to see it till then, but she has a t-shirt coming that's eyeless, right? And someone as sweet and wholesome as Shannon Levangie transforming into the doll of destruction, that's not normally what someone would see, right? And there are, whether it's, you want to use the parlance of our times and the terminology. Sometimes those words make me cringe, but heels turning faces, faces turning heels, people trying different characters that are normally outside their spectrums or just becoming something completely different. I can never pronounce Mortar's name at wrestling character correctly, but
It was Rat Rom,
right.
uh,
Okay.
but he is now Mortar himself. Uh, well, at wrestling with character, once you've graduated to becoming who you actually are, that's they're like, okay, you're big enough to be, so and so on your own, and not like so. For example, when I'm at wrestling with character, I'm not Roughneck Mitchell. I'm Jasper the Eighth, a blind referee, and I love it because I get to act in a way that, like you said, it's freeing. You get to act in a way that is outside of your norm, and it's all part of the show. And there's no other scenario where that I can think of where Roughneck Mitchell would have gotten to do the worm in front of Scotty 2 Hotty, but Jasper the Eighth got to do the worm in front of Scotty 2 Hotty, which is just wild to me.
Yeah, I love that you keep feeding me these segues, man. Because I when I was maybe the last half an hour waiting for you to pop on. I like to do that normally the whole day before I have a conversation or they just to keep everything fresh in mind. But I was just watching it back and I was like, the fact that you got to do the worm with
Mhm.
Scotty 2 Hotty. How did that feel? That had to have been something else, right?
Yeah, I sort of willed it into existence too. Because at Wrestling with Character, every show there's a match that devolves down into just like a dance segment. Um, and in previous shows, on a couple other occasions, Ref Jasper the Eighth did the Worm, and so once I found out that Scotty 2 Hotty was going to be on a Wrestling with Character show, I had to play up that, canonically within Wrestling with Character, there's also a referee who does the Worm. So why not pair him with Scotty 2 Hotty and see what happens? And yeah, it turned out to be the worst Worm that I've ever done. But it popped Scotty 2 Hotty. He laughed, and his son, it was him and his son tagging together. And I had spent the pre-show meet and greet with them the whole time as well, so we'd gotten to like talk and get to know each other and stuff. And which I think led him to be, feel comfortable enough to allow me to do that during the show. And yeah, just talk about a surreal moment for, somebody who grew up, first watching the WWF back during the Attitude Era and, you know, seeing guys like Sky 2 Hotty do the Worm, and then, fast forward 20 years later and you're doing that with him somehow.
Right? It's such a it could be such a surreal moment. There's such a and I was trying to explain this to JJ because we had Donovan Dijak on the podcast about, I don't know, 5 months ago, 6 months ago at this point. Kind of blurs together after a while, to be honest with you. But, I saw him wrestle at NXT Stand and Deliver in Philadelphia in front of 16,000 people with Obafemi
Mm.
and Briggs, right? So for him to have been like sitting there on the couch in his house, but on this thing, it was such a surreal moment. And I could probably just get a slight taste of what I'm saying here is what you felt being able to do the Worm. Cause I feel like that's anybody who lived through that era watching, Tool and Rikishi do their thing. Like, who didn't want to get up and do the Worm? Who didn't want to do the dance with those guys? Like, that's the dream, man. That's the dream.
Yeah. And I mean, on that same show, so this was a little before my time, but so Ted DiBiase was on the show, and there was of course a segment where like, hey, pogo stick guy, I'll give you $1,000 if you can pogo stick 3 times. And of course another heel runs in and knocks him off the pogo stick. Uh, and so yeah, I literally took actual money from Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man, which is crazy.
That's legendary. That's legendary. We talking Milo Mira then? Is that what we're
Yes,
talking?
yeah,
Love Milo.
yes,
Once again, he's been on the podcast. He's a great guy. He's got that super pogo stick of his that he has to pump up for an hour or whatever it
yeah,
is before every show. That thing's incredible. Some people, we talk about wrestling with character, we talk about Radpo, we talk about characters in general. I've tried to explain because there's such a large amount of people who have only watched wrestling on TV. Like they've only watched WWE or TNA or AEW. They don't go to independent shows. And when I try to talk them into coming to an independent show, I'll bring up a guy like the POGO. And they'll be like, how does that work? And they ask me 1,000 questions. They ask me a million questions. Like, does he use it as a weapon? I was like, well, he uses it to spring into the ring sometimes, but I have seen him use it in a spot where he used it in a submission, which was wild with Arcturus, for the chaotic North American title. That was something, but which once again, that's a video on the channel, guys. Go back and double check. But yeah, there are so many there are so many incredibly talented um wrestlers in New England, and that's why it genuinely bothers me, the idea of this tribalism going on. Like, you can only watch the WWE. You're just dismissing like hundreds of thousands of other things that are happening on a regular basis, right? The Wrestling Open every Thursday forever. You're telling me that's not great wrestling on a Thursday night?
Yeah.
What are you watching, dude? Come on. Give me a break. Come
Yeah.
on.
And you mentioned Beyond and Wrestling Open. What they did this past stretch of 5 days or whatever, it has been incredible. They have their every Thursday, every Monday, which itself is crazy. Like,
Yeah.
so like in my experience as a booker, like I just can't even imagine like doing all of that weekly twice. And then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, they just had a huge stretch of shows, Saturday and Sunday led by other companies, but they put this whole thing
They
on, this
facilitate.
Restivus on, and it was a huge endeavor. So yeah, I mean, Drew and Paul over and that whole team over at Wrestling Open, just a huge amount of credit.
Agreed. Shout out to Drew and Paul for sure. I've said that 1,000 times on this. DC is, those guys are, who else really in the independent scene has 2 weekly shows? There's no one. And just the idea. I mean, I used to put on hip hop festivals down in Lynn, Massachusetts in like 2018, 2019. And that was like once or twice a summer or whatever. Like, the idea of doing twice, the logistics of twice a week. My God, like, people don't understand how difficult these jobs can be. So all the praises to bookers, to you, to DC, to Chase Del Monte, to Scott Guerin, to all of them for having to deal with the logistical nightmares that I'm sure that occur on a regular basis, quite frankly.
Yeah,
Ooh.
yeah. But booking is often a thankless job with absolutely no positives that can come from it and a lot of negatives.
Right.
But somebody has to do it in order to run a wrestling company. Um,
Yes. I couldn't agree more. That's why
yeah.
someone like Evan, right? Focus Pro.
Mm.
We JJ and I were at Focus Pro, and and once again, people think like, just because you're saying nice things, you're trying to get something out of it or something, and it's like, no, some people are just nice for like the ability to be nice. Okay. But I've said this to Evan, and I'll say this to anybody else who that I attend a show that they promoted and that they put on. Thank you. Thank you so much. Because maybe he didn't get in the ring, and he said it to me. He's like, "Well, I didn't wrestle." I'm like, "No, but if you weren't here, how would this show have happened, right? How would this show have happened?" So thank you for your job, because otherwise, what am I doing on Saturday?
Yeah.
Something
And
else, I
really
guess.
all the people that you don't see that go into making a wrestling show happen. Um, there's just so many that even on the relatively small scale of Pure Vanguard Wrestling, like the amount of people behind the scenes, on show days to, you know, setting up and breaking down and, making sure people's gear goes to the right spot and, the person who's hitting the button to play the music, the people that aren't like the face characters of your company, like the wrestlers and, even the referees, like there's just so many people that go unsung that put on wrestling shows that yeah, you talk about really doing it for the love of the game. Like they're doing it all behind the scenes.
Yeah, there's so many doing it behind the scenes. Shout out to I mean, we talked about Rebel Spirit, Evan, the photographer. He does some really great work. There's some like Mark, Cinemark. There's so many really great cameramen out there, because, ladies and gentlemen, you could be as talented as Shawn Michaels or Stone Cold Steve Austin, but if you don't have a cameraman or a ring, who cares? There's no one's going to see it, and it's not going to matter. So shout out to to the unsung heroes of professional wrestling. And that's one of the reasons why I make sure to open the door to, I always say, professional wrestlers or wrestling professionals, because they are just as important, right? I know for a fact that there's been a couple of shows I've gone to, especially at like Chaotic or whatever, where they've had upwards of 100 people setting up the all the stuff that you saw in that building. So that's, I mean, it's incredible, right? There are so many people who go in there and they give you everything they have because they love wrestling as much as they do, right? And I have to always, once again, reciprocate that love. And it's like, oh, this is only $15 to be here. It's pretty easy, And I know they're blocking people, so I don't want to say too much about it. But TKO just dropped the tickets for the house shows they're kind of bringing back for the summer,
Mm-hmm.
and they sent me the pre-sale, and the cheapest seats I saw for the SNHU Arena in Manchester were $100, and I couldn't.
A lot.
The front row seats for a Thursday night house show in Manchester were $800, and I just I would rather take that money and go see what DC has to offer for like 52 weeks for the same price, guys. Okay. You talked about Rest of Us. It was $150 for basically Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Sunday was free, right? The fact that DC, and once again, I'm sure there's plenty of other people that had to come on the road to make sure all this happened. But the fact that they were able to pull it off, I was trying to tell this to Simon because I got the luxury of hanging out with Simon Miller for 4 days in Las Vegas. Um, and he was talking about it as everybody's talking about it, to be fair, what's going to happen when WrestleMania 43 is overseas, because you go to WrestleMania week and there are people who go to WrestleMania week and they don't go to WrestleMania. There are 100, 200, 300 other shows going on. There are so many other things going on that are not WWE related. Most of the actual wrestling happening, you could say maybe 80% of it is not WWE related at all. So the big question when we were there over the WrestleMania week was, what are we going to do next week? Next year when they're overseas? And I said, I feel like Northeast is trying that with this Rest of Us. Granted, it was a couple of weeks after WrestleMania. I get it. Someone's gonna be like, "Oh, well, it's not at the same time." But guess what? It could be. There's no reason. If they're over in Saudi Arabia, you know what that means? We can do whatever we want here in America on our soil. So if they run another Rest of Us, but next year they do it on WrestleMania week, oh, come on. People could be coming from everywhere to do that. Or
Absolutely.
so I told Simon Miller, keep your eyes on it, because you never know. He should be coming down to New England. I don't know.
You should.
Definitely should. I think he has lots of fans. Are you a What Culture fan at all?
I like Simon Miller. Yeah.
Yeah, he's my buddy. In fact, you know what? I'm gonna go one step further just to be whatever. We have matching shoes now. We have matching shoes. So Simon, I told you why. Here's why. I told you I had the same shoes, bro. There we go. I'm gonna send that to him later too. He's gonna be like, "That was very random of you, Chris," but okay, I love you anyways.
Jacked
Um,
individual too.
so we've talked about this stuff. How is it working at Pure Vanguard Wrestling as the head of talent relations? Like, how do you balance that with being a referee?
Yeah. So that was another thing that kind of just happened into after deciding to become a referee. Um, right around when I started working with Pure Vanguard, um, coincided with their owner and their previous booker having kind of like a falling out, and for whatever reason, they both owners just trusted me with, like, hey, I'll do it. I'll reach out to the wrestlers and book them on our shows, whatever. Um, Especially because at the time, like both of our owners, they're not they're not former wrestlers. They're not trying to become wrestlers. So outside of their own shows, they're not, super into the wrestling community. Uh, Whereas, I was at PAPW and training to become a ref, and then started refereeing. So I was seeing talent at school and at other shows, and so it just felt like a more natural thing for me to kind of just like slip right into that role of reaching out to people that I was seeing regularly, anyways. Um, but yeah, for like a normal show, we run about 6 shows a year, so like every other month. Um, yeah, it's a lot of like behind the scenes, just like creating like a little mini roster for each match or for each show, because we're not attached to a school, so we don't have like a already existing body of like people that are available
Right, right,
automatically
right,
for our
right.
shows. Um, yeah, so it's really just kind of putting each show together while kind of working on long term storylines, stuff like that. And then on show days, I also uh, referee. So uh, as somebody who would like to try and do as much stuff as possible on show day, like actually making sure that like stuff's getting done, I also have to like be prepared for my like forward facing role as referee to the fans too.
So, that brings a very curious um dichotomy, I would say, because not too many people who have been in your role have also been a referee, at least
Mhm,
in my mind, right?
mhm.
Most it maybe they've I mean, obviously there's been a million people who have been in your role and have been the wrestler, right? That's it. That's the easy one. That's the gimme. That's the layup there. So I guess my question is there any when do you look at things differently when you are um let's say at Vanguard being the referee who also was the booker, as opposed to like going to the open where you don't have to worry about it? Is there like a different mindset when you're in the ring as a referee?
Yeah, for sure. I try and look at each show that I'm on as a referee as its own kind of thing, or especially like each company that I work at as its own thing. I mean, there's a lot of, especially at like some of like the more like larger shows that I referee at, where like I almost don't want to mention that I'm also a booker, because I don't want to kind of put that like into their head of like, oh, like is he gonna try and like book me on his show?
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
try not to
No,
mix too much
right,
of my
right.
role as a booker, especially when I'm at other companies' shows, just kind of out of respect for those companies. Like, I don't want to come off as somebody who's like trying to like poach talent, or like I'm not taking referee shows to talent scout for the company that I book for. If that makes sense. So I definitely try and separate it. Um, that being said, like there's been talent that I've met and worked with numerous times at other companies where, you know, afterwards, like talking on, socials or whatever, like we kind of just come to terms of like, hey, let's bring you in, blah, blah, blah. Like, so, not everybody that I've ever booked, I've never worked with prior. So there's a balance. But definitely don't go to shows like, like, hi, I'm your ref, but I also am a booker. So like, let's talk afterwards. Like, I don't like doing that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on that one because I know like there are certain times where I go to places and I try not, like, let's say wrestling school. I never bring up the idea that I have a podcast because I don't want it to seem like I'm only doing wrestling school so I can get people to come on my podcast.
Mhm.
I mean, coincidentally, plenty of people who are at school with me have been on my podcast, but to be fair, that was before I signed up for the school, so it's not a conflict of interest, guys. Aha, in your face. Um, that was long before technically I really signed up and started training with them. So, and in fact, that's one of the reasons why I tried to get them on my podcast, so that when I signed up, it would be like, all right, we didn't do this because I signed up. We did it after I signed up, right? It makes sense. It makes sense. So I could see where your logic is as well. You don't want that conflict of interest or people worried about your loyalties, and it's just no one needs that, right? This is right, once again, no smoke, no shade. This is where we're at, guys. This is the zone. So, but I could just, my brain thought, man, some people might think, and it's always good, and there's surprisingly a lot of more political stuff that happens in a locker room than some people I think will ever understand, to be fair.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, do you, you know, I mean, you've worked with some of the best talent in New England for sure. I mean, even just in the referee game, I think of Gina, who's been everywhere, right? Action, Ring of Honor. I mean, the accolades, we could list them all. Um, I love Brendan Paul. Love you, Brendan. Tanaka's great. There's so many wonderful. There's so much talent here. Once again, New England is just full of talent. Is there a way for a referee to stand out without trying to steal the spotlight?
For sure. Yeah, like I said before, trying to make yourself as invaluable as possible backstage definitely helps. But in terms of like, when you're actually out there performing, you never want to make it about yourself. Like, the match isn't about the referee. It's about the talent that are, wrestling each other. But you also don't want to just be a stiff board in the corner, that only moves when a pin happens. Like you're part of the performance as well. Um, so I think there's definitely a fine line to balance to where you're part of the show, you're part of the performance, but you're certainly not trying to, you know, up, one up on the talent. You're not trying to make it about yourself. But you're also trying to add to the performance. Um, yeah, I think the biggest thing um, that I think makes you stand out is movement. Not just like standing in a corner or motionless until you need to make a pin.
Right. I've had the luxury of speaking with Aubrey Edwards on a couple of occasions, and I've heard her make sure to talk about the story. And maybe you've seen the video of the referee reffing a match between two invisible guys.
Hmm.
Uh, she loves to tell that story and to make sure everybody goes to see it, because it really does show an audience how, you know, imperative not just a referee, but a good referee is, right? I always talk, I went to the Art Institute of Phoenix to get a bachelor's degree in digital filmmaking and video production. One of the biggest things I always talk about is editing. A great unsung hero of a movie is normally an editor, because when you can normally spot their mistakes, but you normally, unless you really are trained in it, you really don't understand when you see a good editor, right? You really don't. But you could be like, oh, this guy was standing in the corner and then he jumped to the other side, or he had a blue cup in his right hand and all of a sudden he has a green cup in his left hand. You could spot the bad editing. So for me, it takes a trained eye to know the difference between a great referee and a referee. And I feel like that video is such a wonderful representation of a referee.
Hmm.
Have you seen it? Do you agree with that
Yeah,
assessment?
I would love to actually do that myself as well. I think have, I think I would definitely have fun doing like a little 5 minute match of two invisible wrestlers.
Right? It's gotta be I mean, obviously you gotta be the kind of person who could do that in the
Mhm,
first place, or want to do that
mhm.
in the first place. But I feel like for the right individual, that would be an incredible experience that you could always put it on the resume somewhere.
Mhm.
um, you know, in refereeing is so many people don't seem to really get the responsibilities, and I know I've said it before, but man, you must have seen some stuff, man. Is there what this is what question I do like to ask, and mostly because TJ Crawford had a really good answer. So now I'm just trying to see if anybody else has it. Once again, don't have to name names, but you have any road trip horror stories, or maybe the venue wasn't fun or odd, maybe not horror stories, but just
Mm.
interesting stories from a time when you were on the road going to do one of these gigs.
Yeah, I've been lucky, I guess, if you want to call it lucky so far, where I haven't had any horror stories, certainly. Um, but definitely have in the past, worked with a few companies that, like, to put it nicely, don't need to return back. Um, Especially now, with my, infant son at home, I've definitely, since he was born in September, and especially now in 2026, I've definitely gone by, you know, quality bookings over quantity of bookings. Whereas my first, however many months starting out, especially before my son was born, if there was a show that I was free for, I was trying to do it, as many as possible. But especially once I got that, like, foundation under my belt after a certain however many matches, um, yeah, really just focusing on quality over quantity, so that I don't have those horror stories of awful venues, awful, you know, experiences. I will say, it's not my style of wrestling, but when you go to the more, like, hardcore or deathmatch type companies, um, it definitely brings in a different fan base. Um, and I say that, having done a few shows at GCW now, which is known for their deathmatch style. Um, it definitely a different fan base from what I see at the other, however many companies I work for in the Connecticut, New England area. Um, it brings out a different type of person, and not really my style, but everyone has their own wrestling style, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, it's funny. Corey yesterday he kept calling it ice cream. He's like, everybody's got their own flavor of ice
Hmm.
cream, right? And it's
Absolutely.
it's so it's so true because there's so many different styles. Simon loves the goofy wrestling, right? I'm sure I told him when I saw him, I was like, listen, you got to see this guy named Brian Bayside. He does all kinds of great stuff. You're gonna love him. All right, shout out to Brian. I love you, Brian.
Mm.
Um, there's so many different styles of wrestling, and you don't need to adapt, quite frankly, because if there's a particular style, you can go on something like Independent Wrestling TV and find 100 organizations that do probably a similar style, and you'll be great, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. Um, so, you kind of talked about it a little bit, but I'm curious. Who were your favorites growing up?
So, you know, growing up and starting watching wrestling in the, mid to late 90s, that was peak Attitude Era. So I was a huge fan of the Hardy Boys. But really, before, like, the whole, like, invasion and all that stuff happened, almost more so than watching Raw, I would watch WCW, and particularly at the time, their cruiserweight division was just insane with like a young Chris Jericho and Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, Psychosis, like that group, Juventud Guerrero, like that whole like group of small, and I'm a small guy myself. These like smaller, exciting wrestlers, like really was like first like what got me hooked into watching it, and then once the Attitude Era and like Stone Cold and stuff started blowing up even more, then that's when it was really like, okay, it could also be uh, Stone Cold driving down with a beer truck and blasting its hose at people.
Classic. And then Kurt Angle follows up with the milk truck, right?
Yes.
Absolute classics. Um Now we I guess in the thought process here is, looking at the wide range of positions in professional wrestling. If you weren't able to ref right now, what else do you think you could be doing for these other companies? I'm curious.
um, Realistically, I mean, outside of just like being a helping hand at shows, which are always needed. Um, Before I started refereeing, I did, I've done camera for a few companies. That would probably be like my most natural like second area, like if I couldn't physically perform. But like especially now that like I have like the background in booking and creative, that's probably the area where I is definitely the most interesting for sure. And then yeah, just kind of being that like that go to person for like an owner or uh whoever runs the show, to just kind of be like, hey, this needs to get done real fast, like, hey, you know can you handle this for me? Just kind of being that like person to get stuff done behind the scenes.
Right. I mean, to put it in the Attitude Era terms, Briscoe and Patterson, right? Those guys were you. People could say whatever they want about their characters on television, but behind the scenes, there was no doubt about who knew what they were actually doing in this industry. All right.
Absolutely, yeah.
Especially the idea that they were able to put together pretty much all of a good chunk of the bigger shows, especially like the Royal Rumble. Like, it's not easy to take 30 guys and be like, well, we're going to do these couple of spots with you and all this other stuff. Like, the fact that you're able to put that out there is great. Um, do you get any bombarding from backseat bookers?
Yeah, absolutely. Whether it's talent or like wrestlers pitching ideas for themselves, or like, hey, I'd really like to work with so and so. And a lot of it is coming from people that I consider friends too. So like they have that like comfortability to be able to pitch something like that. Um, when it's people that I'm like not like close enough to be friends with, or like especially people that I haven't worked with before, pitching ideas, or like, hey, that doesn't work for me, brother, kind of thing. Like, that's when it's like, okay, like, maybe we don't have to work together.
Right, right.
Yeah,
So, because it's a very big taboo to go to the booker and ask for something. At least it seems to me from an outside perspective. Is there a way where it can be done with all due respect, where someone could come to you and be like, I had this idea, or maybe you put two wrestlers together and you wanted them to do XYZ, and they're like, but I've been kind of wanting to do this ABC thing I've been working on. Is there a diplomatic way of someone coming to a booker and asking without it making them seem like they're being disrespectful or anything of those regards?
sure. And I mean, a- especially at Pure Vanguard, and I can't speak for other companies because I don't know how other companies do their creatives, but we're it's not it's not like a dictatorship of like one person like this is my idea, this is what's going to happen, no variations, no changes. We're pretty open to making adjustments if they make sense, if all parties involved, like if it works for everyone. um so we're pretty democratic in that process. um that comes with its limits, of course. Whether it's somebody not wanting to take a pin because of how it would be perceived in other companies that aren't us. That's where like that kind of like respect comes in, where it's like, that's not our company, it's not really our issue, like how you're booked other places, because that's not here. I think of every company as its own like section of the multiverse, like what you are in one company, like you're the same person, but like you're a different. It's like the MCU, like with like Marvel and stuff. It's like this is the 616 over here. This is our, 27 over here. What you're doing in one place shouldn't affect what you're doing at another place. But some owners definitely still think that way. That there's some places where, if you're a champion somewhere and you get pinned at another company that, has nothing to do with where you're a champion at, like you could get stripped of your belt. And that's definitely not how we think at Pure Vanguard when it comes to our booking. Like if our champion loses somewhere, obviously they're not putting our title on the line elsewhere. Um, if you're booked to get pinned at another company, that's what that company wants to do. That doesn't affect us.
See, and that's refreshing to hear because so often I hear from veterans, they say stuff like, keep your mouth shut, don't say anything, blah, 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 blah. But then every once in a while, you'll hear those same people say, like, well, if you had an idea, you should have said something. It's like, well, which way do you want me to go, man? Should I keep my
Right.
mouth shut or should I have given you an idea? 'Cause, You know, uh, I'd love, once again, people shouldn't just walk in the door and think they're just going to book for you. That would be crazy. But if maybe they were working on something and they're like, hey, do at least let them pitch, is what I'm saying. At least let them pitch, right? If they're a
Yeah.
fan, then
I'm
you can
open to
tell them,
all. I'm open to all ideas. Whether or not I follow through with it is another thing. But I'm
there you
open to
go.
hearing it.
Right, right. You're ready and willing to listen.
Yes.
Do you get to watch product these days? And is there anything that you watch more than others?
Currently, I am not watching any weekly uh corporate level wrestling, if you want to call it that. I sometimes go through phases where, like with WWE, for example, like there'll be times where I'm locked in and I'm watching Raw and SmackDown every week and watching every premium live event. You know, Other times it'll wane a little bit. Like this time, like right now, for example, like the post WrestleMania kind of, it's kind of like fallen off for me a little bit. For like various reasons. It's not to, you know, shit on WWE or, anything like that. I just kind
Right,
of go through like
right,
ebbs
right,
and flows.
right.
Yeah.
Do you watch anything for like tape purposes, like maybe to see other talents in the area to see what they're
Yeah.
capable of doing?
Yeah. Our standard, if somebody reaches out that we haven't worked with before and they reach out like asking about bookings, we'll always ask for, send me some matches, or send me what you think is your best representation of what you are as a wrestler, as a character. Yeah, and we'll we'll take a look at that, as well as looking to see how they are on their social media, like, because, like it or not, that's a huge part now of promoting yourself as a wrestler and promoting whatever shows you're going to be on is, what your social media presence is like. Um, you could be a really talented wrestler. You could be local, you could be inexpensive, like the perfect combination of like somebody that you would love to have working for you. But if your work, your in character social media accounts are all just like complaining about whatever and getting into arguments with people, like, you know, your match tapes could be great, but do we really want to bring you in, if it's gonna bring any sort of, negativity along with it. So yeah, long story short, I do watch match tapes that get sent to us. Um, but at least on my end, from the booking side, more goes into it than just, how talented are you in whatever match highlights you chose to send over.
Yeah, and I talked to a lot of young talent about a couple of things. One of them being, social media presence. I mean, we look at Richard Holiday, and shout out to Ben. I love you, Ben. Super nice guy. Anytime he's in town, he has a nice conversation with my daughter, and I always love when he does that. But those guys are posting 2 or 3 times a day, and they've become the almost the epicenter, you could say. They're the role model. And so when I talk to talent and I see like, hey man, just post a couple of more things. And honestly, that's one of the reasons why I started doing the channel the way I do it, because I noticed there was a genuine lack from certain areas or certain companies or certain people who weren't posting their own stuff. And now I post stuff 2 or 3 times a day, and at least they get a freebie that day, you know?
Hmm.
I like to say to I like to say to my daughter, at the very least, you made Shannon Levanchi's life a little easier because she posts like 2 things about her a day. So she's out there in the universe and she didn't have to do anything besides
Hmm.
let you love her so much, right? So uh but it's never a horrible idea to kind of take that upon yourself and take a step further. And you know, I mean, obviously there's a certain level and gravitas to it here, but I mean, if you get a younger person or maybe even older person, like a Mike Grossa who's been around for 16 years at this point, I doubt that. I mean, maybe you could tell me. I don't want to get too presumptuous here, but are they able to come to you and say, "Hey, you know what? I need more guidance on this. Where do I go from here?"
Mm.
Right?
Yeah, I can I can't think of too many times where especially older talent have come to me with like advice or help. I would definitely say, like, especially some of the my fellow PAPW students who were, maybe were around a little before me. So therefore they are, more veteran than I am. Um, the ones that I've gotten close with, we've definitely been able to have more of that, kind of dialogue of, maybe like what I think could help, or what I think maybe like if you're doing something that I think might be like hurting your overall look or your career. Um, but as somebody, especially somebody who didn't come in from the wrestling side, I also don't want to, I'm not the expert on that type of stuff, and I definitely don't want to feel like I'm overstepping my area of expertise, which even in my area I can't call it expertise, but like I'm never. I'm always careful when, and I don't even want to say criticizing, but um, critiquing maybe things on the wrestling side of things, because as somebody who has never wrestled a match before, like I've seen and worked plenty of matches, but I haven't wrestled them myself. So like, who am I to give advice on like, hey, maybe your headlock could be a little tighter, or whatever.
Right, 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 right,
I
right.
and I you never know how people are going to take unsolicited advice. Not everyone is as open to it as, like, I'm very open to unsolicited advice. Like, like I said before, whether or not I'm gonna take that advice is one thing, but I'm always open to hearing it.
And I always think those, I mean, at least for me, being someone who was in the army, especially something like constructive criticism, I always feel like that's a mark of someone who's willing to take, advice or at least listen to unsolicited advice. It's more of a freeing experience, right? For me at least, it's just the idea of listening to someone and understanding their perspective doesn't necessarily mean you have to actually take the advice and run with it, but the idea that, you know, I would say, I guess people like us would be at least willing to hear them out and try to comprehend their perspective. It's just a sign of respect,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
You're just showing them respect and realistically speaking, especially in 2026, hoping you can maybe get that respect reciprocated in some way due to the fact that you gave them that respect to begin with. So, I mean, for me, it's almost hard to turn the dad part off, right? Because I'm especially during classes, I'm in the ring with kids half my age, people that are younger than my children, for God's sakes, and I see them doing things, and I'm like, listen, I don't know anything about this wrestling stuff, but here's this book called Rich Dad Poor Dad. Learn about your finances a little more because you don't want to be the 40-year-old me. You want to do better than I did, right? So, and, financial literacy is certainly something that the wrestling profession and professional wrestlers in general wouldn't hurt to learn a little more about. But
Absolutely.
um, the idea of at least just being open and willing to allow the universe to send you a message, I think is a beautiful thing. Um, so with that being said, let's have a I feel like we got all intense for a second there. I'm gonna have a pause for a second. How about outside of wrestling, what do you do for fun? You do anything else?
Uh, well, now that I have an infant at home, he kind of takes up most of my free time, if you want to call it that. Um, prior to that, I had been playing in a baseball league for um, most of my adult life. I could never get into playing softball. Like, I grew up playing baseball. I could never get into slow pitch softball. So I found a baseball league that I could play in, and that had been fun. But once the kid was born, I really only had time to do one sort of hobby, if you want to call it that, and wrestling for sure won out on that. My wife and I are both into going down to Disney, as a lot of wrestlers seem to be. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, it helps that my shoot job is being technically a cast member at Disney, working for ESPN, so that definitely helps with being able to go down, you know, like once a year or whatever. Yeah, that's probably all, like, hobby wise. That sounds sad as an adult, but um,
You do have a new kid. I mean,
yeah.
like, I barely got to be back into wrestling, and that's just because my daughter fell in love with wrestling,
Hmm.
to be honest. So
Hmm.
I had plenty of other things we did. I'm a huge baseball fan. I'm a Red Sox fan. I'm originally
Hmm.
from Lowell myself. But there was I mean, and my daughter is now 13, right? I of all my baby, I should say, she's my baby. I of all people would completely understand the idea of, well, I used to do this, and then the child existed, and then that's other thing stopped, right?
Yeah.
Because I had to put my entire life on hold a few times to make sure that's what you do. That's what you do when you're a good parent, at least, or
Hmm.
when you're at least attempting to be a good parent. You put your own pursuits on hold if necessary. You don't
Hmm.
always have to do it, but if it's
Yeah.
necessary, yeah, of course, right?
Yeah.
Um,
And on my end, giving up baseball was, not just a time thing, but like physically, like, you know, being in my late 30s now, I could really only physically do either a couple baseball games a weekend or a show, or maybe two a weekend. So yeah, I could physically only do one or the other. My body wouldn't hold up otherwise.
what position do you play?
I mostly played second base, center field. I used to catch a lot when I was younger.
Ooh,
Yeah.
catching is rough on the knees for sure.
Yes. Yeah.
People very much underestimate how tough it is to be a catcher. And that's one of the reasons why I have so much respect for lifelong, like Jason Varitek. The
Hmm.
fact that that man was a catcher for as long as he was, El Capitano,
Yeah.
love you, right? That,
Before they had the knee savers too.
right, exactly. Come on,
Yeah.
jeez, that is some absolute stuff. You got to give it up to those guys for. People say, "Oh, well, it's just a game," and it's like, "All right, bro, but doesn't mean it's not difficult to do it.
Right. Right.
Just because it's just a game doesn't mean it's not physical. Go ahead. I would love to see one of those people run an actual regulation from home plate to first base as fast as they can, and they're like, "What? That was so look
Yeah.
exactly. Should go sit down." Just sit. Same thing with those backseat bookers that have never wrestled a day in their life, and I'm like, why don't you go bump? Why don't you go take a bump? You never
Yeah.
taken a bump. You never even stepped foot in a ring in your entire life, sir or ma'am or whatever you call yourself. You've never done it. So would you just sit down and stop pretending like you would have booked WrestleMania better than Triple H?
Yeah.
Stop.
I've definitely seen like once someone who isn't in the business at all, or like tries to get into it, like the really like the first time running the ropes or the first time taking bumps is when they're like, oh wow, okay, uh all right, that's I understand now.
There's that come to Jesus moment when you're like, oh, I have bitten off more than I can chew.
Yeah.
I have
Yeah,
written it.
those ropes
Yeah,
more often than not are steel cable covered in usually just like electrical tape. uh the ring is like 2-inch thick like wooden slabs on top of steel with like 2 inches of like a heart, like a foam padding over it. um so like it's not like a bed or a trampoline or um yeah.
those trampoline kids like, oh, I did it when I was a kid. Yeah, you were on a trampoline. That's not the same
Yeah.
thing. It's not the same thing. Maybe it felt like that to you because you were 10 years old, and that's cool, bro. Imagination, I get it. But hit that actual rope and tell me how it feels. It's not the
Mhm.
same as hitting the cage of your trampoline. It's just
Yeah.
not. It's really not. Um, What? How about let's do a positive one, right? Let's go back. Do you have any positive message for maybe an up and coming wrestler or someone who's thinking about becoming a ref?
Yeah. It's really just, make yourself as invaluable as possible to the people who would potentially be booking you. Whether that's like coming to a show that you're not booked at and just offering your help. Um, and it, what's called in the business is paying your dues, which a lot of people outside of the wrestling industry don't really understand. Definitely something that I've had to explain to the wife a couple times. Like, what do you mean you're not getting paid for this thing? Like, why are you doing it then? Um, it's a lot of like putting in like time and effort, uh, and outside of the people who can do it for a living, you're not really doing it for money. Um,
Right.
so it's really just like making yourself invaluable and putting in the time and effort to make yourself stand out in some way. It's like on the wrestling side, you can find, in New England alone, you can turn around and find, 50 wrestlers who can wrestle good. Um, but like what makes you stand out so that you get booked versus, being somebody who's a really good wrestler, but they don't get bookings because, what's making them special, what's making them stand out. So I really think it's finding that that niche, like what role do you fill on a wrestling show? Not every match on a wrestling show needs to be a 5-star Dave Meltzer, New Japan style match. There's room on shows for comedy matches. There's room on shows for good, like actual tag team wrestling. Um, Wrestling shows can and should have more than one women's match on a show. Um, it's all just about like finding what role you fill well, and marketing that to people that you want to work for.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree with more on the women's match thing. I can definitely say that there's been um a few occasions where there's been a couple of different shows going on, and my daughter and I look at the card and we're like, all right, well, who's going to be there? And it's like, but this show doesn't have any women on it.
Mm.
All right, well, my daughter wants to see women wrestle, guys, and what am I going to do? Tell her you can't do that today just because whatever? No, if she wants to see him, yeah, let's do it. So we will go to another show because they'll have more women wrestling, or just at least have one.
Yeah, yeah,
And I know I mean, it's not always the booker's fault, right? Maybe they're booked it somewhere else, or they couldn't get them in time or
yeah.
something, or they got
And
sick.
I say that as a booker who, you know, I don't know if one of the like Pure Vanguard shows in particular, I don't know if we've had a show that's had more than one women's match, and I know that's something that I need to do better at. Like I need to book these shows better. You know, there's obviously a lot of factors that go into it. Without getting too like behind the weeds, like because of just the pure supply and demand, women
Exactly.
wrestlers could typically charge more because there's fewer of them. And if
Exactly.
they're actually good at wrestling, then they could charge a lot more. If you've been on, TV at all, or, for the bigger companies, then, obviously your rate goes up, and that goes for men as well. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm sure I would like to think most companies go about it with the best intentions and want to book more, whatever it is, whether it's strictly women's wrestling or more comedy matches, whatever you want to call it. You know, if it fits in the budget, if it fits into people's availability, like there's obviously a lot of stuff that goes into it. Um, I know personally, I would want to, and I do want to book more women wrestlers on my shows. And that's one of the great things about like Wrestling Open and companies like Blood, Sweat, and Tears. Like I just worked a show with Blood, Sweat, and Tears a few weeks ago where I worked with, I believe it was 8 like phenomenal women talent, like all on one show. Um, it was like the great, it can be done, is what I'm trying to say. It can be done, and I know I can do better as a booker on that. and I know other shows can too.
Right. And you know what? I gotta respect the fact that you're so humble and you're even like calling yourself out at this point. You're like, hey man, I could do better. I love that because it shows how your mind is open, and it shows how, we're all human, right? We all can do better. I could probably sit here for 45 hours and tell people how I could do a lot of things a lot better, right? So there's so many. I wish I had a better light for this particular part every day, right? I'm literally, it is so hot right now. It's like 97 degrees. I had to make sure to turn off my AC, and I've been sitting here with these ice packs. Probably find a better AC or something. I don't know. There's so many things we could always try to, get ourselves on. So the idea of being able to do that and be constructive with it is always such a great mindset to go into, I would say, right? So, and at the same point, I've had this conversation with talent and with fans, like, you know at times it does seem like a mad grab, especially for women, right? Because it's like, okay, there's maybe 3 or 4 shows going on the same day, and they're all fighting over the same Livia or the same Shannon Levangie or the same. They're like, well, we want her. You know what I mean? Like, there's always there's those staples, right? And then my brain goes to them first. Obviously, I love. I almost said the shoot name. I'll say Selena, sister Selena, right? Selena, I love you so much. Thank you for being part of the family, Auntie Selena. Um, there's a lot. We have a big wrestling family. I'm really putting them all out there. But there are so many shows, and there are plenty of there can be a certain finite of women. I do know that as soon as JJ turns 16, she's already pledged to a wrestling school, so she's going to be getting in there. Um, July 19th, there's a special camp at the New England Pro Wrestling Academy for ages 7 through 13, to do like a 1 day fantasy camp for kids. So JJ is going to be at that as well, and I think it's great. And you guys you said it at the beginning of this podcast like 2 hours ago. At this point, you guys, the Vanguard, you don't have your own wrestling school. So it's almost more difficult for you to get people like a Shannon Levangie, because she's going to pick chaotic over everybody else, right? Because she's a Nepois student. There's Lauren St. James is probably going to pick Wrestling Open or Beyond over anybody else because she's a BioPro kid, and et cetera, et cetera. We could sit here all day and name them all, guys. Well, you didn't name this one. Yeah, I know. That's why I put out 2 examples and moved on. All right. There are so many. It can be a little more difficult for someone like you to get more talent of a certain degree, because someone like a Mortar is a chaotic person. So someone like a man, I could be here forever, right? I
Yeah,
mean, granted, not to be saying you can't ever get them, but I'm just saying that there are times where their loyalties may lie at home a little more often, is all I'm trying to say.
everyone has their home promotions. They're the promotions that where, if you see, X company has a show on that date, that like a certain number of talent are going to be there no matter what. So they're not going to be available to you. Um, so yeah, it's really just kind of finding a balance of who's available, what storylines you have going on, what fits in your budget, who's there. You know, there's a lot of stuff that goes into it for sure.
Yeah, so many variables. It's as a person who likes science way too much, that kind of stuff. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I love baseball. There's always you could take the exact same pitcher and the exact same batter and change one of 1,000 different variables, and that sequence of the up could go completely differently, but what if the barometer dropped, so that ball dropped just slightly, and now it's a home run, right? What if it's a scorching 97-degree day, and now there's not even moisture in the air, so that fastball is just zipping in, and now he strikes out. You know what I mean? There's so many different variables that go into life in general, that um it's not always clear cut as some people like to make it out to be. It's like, have you not been alive? Like that's not that is not how this works, people. It's not how this works. It would be lovely if things could be as simple, but there's always the variables. And as I like to tell people as much as possible, anything is possible, right? A rocket could fall out of the sky and land on me right now. That's possible. It's the probability that you have to actually average yourself on. The probability of it's something genuinely occurring is completely different from what's actually possible, right? It's not the same thing. It's not remotely close. So, um, yeah, man, it's been a genuine pleasure speaking with you. I would say, Corey, you were right. This guy's awesome. I love this guy, right? Nick, it's been a great time talking to you. Um, I see that you're upcoming. You have the Cabo Wrestle. Did I say that right?
Cabaret Wrestle, yeah.
Cabo Wrestle. Okay, so you got that 523 and 66 band card we talked about, 613. Truly independent wrestling on 620. EST on 627. So that's like your pretty good schedule for the next month or so, right?
Yep.
I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah, and then I believe GCW is returning to Hartford in July, so I'll be there for that. Hopefully, I won't get power bombed out of the ring like I did the last time I was there.
yeah,
'Cause that was a little scary. In hindsight, I don't know why I pitched that idea and volunteered to do it. But it was fun.
right. So many times it can really just come down to who's in the ring with you and do you trust them, right? Do you trust them? So, um, but Drager and I were talking about this when he was on the podcast. Shout out to Drager. The whole idea of like paying your dues, that entire concept is something that the average person doesn't ever have to deal with, so they don't understand. Me, as someone who is in the U.S. Army, I feel like I've learned how to pay my dues pretty well. When, with all due respect, I feel like you could put me through the ringer really bad in a wrestling capacity, and it wouldn't be as much as it was when I was in basic training. With all due respect, with all due respect, not to say they can't be jerks or whatever else, but I think my drill sergeant wins every time. I mean, I could be wrong. I could be wrong, but I just feel like the Army was going to be worse. All right, because at least in the wrestling ring, no one's genuinely tried to kill me. All right.
Exactly.
That job's a little different, guys. A little different. All right. So, anything else we should shout out for you for your upcoming stuff? I feel like I
Yeah,
plug it
yeah.
out.
You plugged it pretty well. Yeah, so yeah, Pure Vanguard Wrestling on June 13th is it's our second anniversary show. Um, we're a smaller company, but we're really proud and happy to have been around for 2 full years now. We have some exciting plans in the future for the company. So it being like my creative baby, if you want to call it that, like it's definitely been really rewarding to work for them. Um, Definitely a big change from, working at a company like GCW or Beyond or Fourth Row, but like, very rewarding because, at the end of the day, I knew that I had my thumbprint is on it, basically.
Right. Of
So yeah,
course.
those shows always mean a lot to me. And then, yeah, just all the other fun companies that I'm either looking forward to returning to or debuting at. And then, yeah, I'm just looking forward to doing stuff with my son for his first summer. You know,
Hey,
I'm
well,
sure it's going to include a lot of splash pads and water parks and stuff.
right, right. Hey, from one father to another, enjoy every minute of it and never feel guilty if you have to throw anything else away for your kids. Like, genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, like I said, I have 3 kids. My oldest is 24, and, it goes fast. It goes so fast. The fact that my son's 24 already blows my mind.
That's
Like, it,
wild. Yeah.
it blows, it completely blows my mind, right? It just like, Like, what? Where did time go? Time is so fleeting. So
Mm. And
as much as I love,
I'm guessing this will come out around Father's Day. So shout out to all the dads in the wrestling
yeah,
industry.
there you go. Perfect, perfect. Shout out to the rest of the dads in the universe. Make sure you take care of your kids because your kids need you as much as you need them. So for any new fathers, especially yourself, sir, I just say, be as selfish as you need to with that child because that child loves you as much as you love them, and they will always respect and reciprocate it back. And I can tell you from experience. And you might make mistakes and you might feel like you ruin things, and I don't know how many times I've been in a room feeling doubt and shame and all kinds of craziness, and all it takes is for that child to walk up to you and say I love you, or give you that look, and everything melts away. So there's
Absolutely.
nothing, and God bless, there's nothing on earth, as much as I love wrestling and other such things, there's just nothing on earth but the love of your child. So
Absolutely.
more power to you and to your lovely family, and I'm so happy that it's growing for you, man. It's wonderful. I gotta give all the love back, and fathers beat for all the universe for sure. Shout out to all of them. But so for anyone, friend, I made sure to plug all your stuff first. I'll finish up with mine. The next episode is going to be with the superstar prospect of Memphis, the new king of Memphis, Tim Bosby. He will be the next person on the podcast, and after him will be the Wind Dragon Dustin Wen. He is going to be coming on the podcast as well. Two guys that I met in Vegas, and they're super talented, so I'm excited to have them on the podcast. But once again, Ref Nick Mitchell, thank you so much for being on here today with me. It's been a genuine honor and a pleasure and a privilege to have you, sir. So thank you so much. But for everybody else, have a nice day. Peace.